Hi everyone, a very good afternoon to everyone who's joined from India. Good evening and good afternoon to people who've joined from elsewhere. Thanks so much for joining the session today. This is our first webinar for 2020. So those of you who've joined us regularly, you know that we do this every month, and I'm glad to see you all back. For those who've joined us for the first time, a very warm welcome to you, and I hope you find this session useful. So we're kick starting with something that we've never talked about before at LeadSquared. We're talking about a quality management system. So essentially, how to improve the service quality of your sales team. Some of the things that we'll talk about, of course, what is a quality management system? Who is it relevant for? How do you now, if some of you can't hear me, just do let me know. So that's one thing. If you cannot hear me at any stage, just send me a chat message, or just ping me and I'll see to it. Now we have two first timers from LeadSquared who are going to take the session forward. That one is Gaurav and the other is Aditya. So our experts today, Gaurav, Aditya, please share a few lines about yourself and take the session forward.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Gaurav, and I will be presenting you the system today, and I'll be talking about what a QMS platform is. Just to give you a brief on my profile, I have been working on multiple CRM products for last 13 years, and at LeadSquared, my focus area is mapping different business use case and customer requirements on LeadSquared. Aditya?
Hey everyone, good afternoon and glad that all of you could join in today. I'm Aditya and I'm a big time techno sales enthusiast. One of my favorite things to do is to deep dive into different business processes and try to understand how they work and solve their pain points. An example of that is what we'll cover today. I'm incredibly thrilled for this session, particularly because service quality as a term is something which is industry agnostic. It applies to pretty much any business where a sale is involved, be it an insurance organization trying to sell a policy, be it a real estate company trying to sell a property, or even an edtech or a university trying to sell a course or fill a seat. Wherever there's a sale involved, service quality goes hand in hand. With that said, just to probably gauge the room, Shubhani, can we run a quick poll to just identify which industries all our audience belong to?
Sure. So here is the first poll for you. Which industry do you belong to or work for? So obviously the industry you're representing right now, which industry do you represent? Is it the finance industry, real estate, healthcare, education, or others? And if it's others, please do maybe on the chat let us know what are these other industries that you're representing. We've just sort of picked up the main industries that we usually get our audience from, but it's we're always glad to have people from other industries. I can tell you that the vast majority are actually from education or others. I can see there's no one on finance right now. There's no one from real estate, no one from healthcare, unless you guys are being lazy and not clicking on a button. So all you have to do is click on a button on the screen and just let us know which industry do you represent. Um, so I'm seeing some other questions coming in. Yes. So Vanaja, I'm so sorry if I mispronounced your name. She says IT solution. So yeah, IT services, I suppose. Parul says CRM. So it'll be a mix of IT and software, but the vast majority I see are from education and others. All right. So Aditya, that's your number.
Thank you, Shubhani, and thank you guys for giving us an idea about that. To set the agenda for this session, we'll obviously be talking about what sales service quality is, why it's important, and when you deal with a subjective term like quality, how you can go ahead and actually quantify it, break it down into smaller pieces, which everyone can understand. Then we'll go ahead to what a quality management system is, why it's important, why you need it. And towards the end of the session, we'll also give you a glimpse of how you can customize and leverage LeadSquared to solve all the problems which we discussed about in the first half of the webinar. Going forward, sales service quality is an interesting angle. It's an interesting topic, and to explain it, let me start off with a story. It's a personal story. So a few years back, when I started college, I was in need of a new laptop. So what I did was I called up this dealer nearby. They were a non-exclusive dealer. All I needed was a Windows laptop. I'm not a big-time gamer. I needed a simple above-average Windows system. So the first thing which happened after I made the call, and as soon as I uttered the word laptop, was the dealer telling me about this new range of MacBooks which had come in with all the latest features. It took me about 20 seconds to cut him off and tell him that this is not something that I'm looking for. I've never been a big Apple fan, and all I needed was a Windows system. So the next thing I heard was a pitch about all the latest heavy graphic gaming laptops which had come into the market. Again, took me another 20, 30 seconds to interrupt him and tell him that, that's not something I need. I'm not a gamer at all. I just need a simple Windows system. And by the time I could get to him what I exactly need, my experience with that dealer was already broken. I was getting the feeling that I will not be able to get what I want. Rather, I will be getting what they want me to buy. And right off the bat, that's not a feeling which you want to have as a prospective buyer. So that's the idea behind sales service quality. When you're trying to sell, the first thing off the bat should be to try and understand what problem your buyer is facing, and you need to try and solve that issue. So you fitting in your solution into their minds is not going to work. Rather, it will be about trying to understand what they want to do. Gaurav, something you want to add here?
No, please continue.
Okay, like I said, see the graphics in here are, it's just a representation of what I faced. And when you multiply this by a thousand consumers facing this daily, and you can get an idea about where you can potentially lose a sale. So that's one of the main aspects as to why sales service quality is important, basically to understand what your buyer is trying to solve. So like I mentioned, this could be the example which I mentioned was of a telecall use case, but this could very easily extend to any customer facing role. Anyone who is looking to buy or anyone who is looking for a query resolution aspect, the experience which your brand or which your users provide to them is the first and foremost thing which will make an impact on them. And wherever you have this experience provided by humans, there is always a scope for improvement. Because for a long time now, we think of the sales process as either B2B or B2C. Business to business or business to consumer are common jargons which we use in business. But it's high time that we start thinking about it as hedge to edge, because at the core of it, a sale is always going to be human to human. And that's why it's necessary to understand what the person on the other side is trying to solve. So now that you've made the efforts to do that, what next? So if you want to really get into the depths and assess your service quality, there are pretty much three things which you will have to do. The first thing is that you will have to identify users or teams within the sales umbrella whom you think make the biggest impact on the customer. These could be telecallers, these could be field executives, these could be the query resolution team. Pretty much anyone who you think in your business makes the biggest impact on the customer experience journey. Once you've done that, you will have to identify a few actions or a few touch points which these users perform regularly. This could be, like I mentioned, a call which goes through. This could be a meeting which they have with the person, an in-person meeting. And the third and the final step, which is probably the most important, will be to weight each action. So you're basically saying, if a person calls and you're trying to gauge if they're trying to understand the customer's needs, if they have enough product knowledge to actually answer the questions put forward by the customer, or if someone goes to meet a person, you want to check if they've collected the relevant documents, if they have pitched the right solution. So all of these are actions, and you gauge the weightage of these actions. So a few examples of these actions are listed here on the screen: asking the right kind of questions, understanding the needs of the customer, and even something as simple as soft skills. The tone which you use to talk to a person can make a lot of difference in the minds of the buyer. Going forward, so this, like I mentioned, is one of the first steps: how you think the buyer is thinking and what you think they're looking to solve. Obviously, the second step, like I mentioned, will be to identify the teams, the actionable items, the touch points, and weight them. Now that you've done with these things, the next step will be, how do I assess them? Finding these areas is one step, evaluating it is a whole another situation. So that's where we move into our second aspect of quality management. And before I get there, okay, so I think I've covered everything which I wanted to say here. So like I mentioned, the evaluation aspect is where the concept of quality management comes in. To put this across very simply, it's just a case of finding how effective the parameters which you chose before are being performed by each of your sales folks. Could be your telecallers, could be your field executives, or your query resolution team. So once you've identified these touch points, to get a sense of how effectively it's being carried out, how you numerically quantify each of these values, is where quality management comes to the rescue. And one more aspect here would be, for all of these parameters which you've chosen, the best thing to quantify quality, which can sometimes be a very tough task, is is the weightage aspect which comes in. So you numerically assign a value to every parameter you've chosen and grade the users based on the experience they're providing. Before we go forward with the quality management piece, I just wanted to get a sense of how popular this term is. How many of you either have a quality management system or have heard of this term quality management before? So Shibani, if we can run one more quick poll on that.
Sure, Aditya. So, yeah, here goes your next question. It's on your screen. Just tap the option that is relevant to you. Do you know what a quality management system is? Say yes or no, or if you're not sure about the entire idea and you may know, but you don't really know it, that you know that, just say not sure. So, just let us know, do you know what a quality management system is? So, actually, yeah, I mean, I'm quite surprised by this result, but 52% say yes. That's okay. That's good then. We have a smart audience here. 48% now say yes because it keeps fluctuating as people vote. And 12% are saying no. And then another 42% are saying not sure. So maybe I might take back my words. But yeah, 43% say yes, 14% say no, and another 43% say not sure. Over to you, Aditya.
Thank you, Shibani. If I'm to club the not sure and no responses, it effectively becomes almost a 50-50 or a 40-60 scenario. Uh, so like we discussed before, quality management is just an extension of how the sales service quality aspect. We talked about why sales service quality is important and how you're going to gauge different users. So the next step will be to actually evaluate these parameters and understand how probably each individual is performing. The goal here is obviously not to keep an eye on each and everyone and all their activities, but the larger picture will obviously be to try and understand the experience which a potential buyer can get from anywhere in your organization, because every sales agent is basically a representation of your brand. So like I mentioned, quality management is an extension of the sales service quality aspect, and it involves you as a leader or as a manager trying to identify all the actions and touch points performed by your team members and evaluating them at regular intervals to see if your organization is at the level of excellence which you want it to be. If not, this will also help you get there. This is will help you go from a work in progress to something which is already there. And any system which helps you do this is essentially a quality management system. It's inherently, let's say, a tool for your quality sales, quality audit team, the auditors and the audit managers, to go around their business and weave their magic. So this is a little comic strip which we thought would be relevant and would put it across in a lighter fashion. Uh, Going forward, for to implement any system to its fullest potential, the first part would be to analyze the areas what it needs to solve. So the first thing, like I mentioned, is to identify the teams. I know when we talk about sales, we talk a lot about the telecallers. So because these experiences are very common, all of us get calls from telecallers. Probably every organization has telecallers, maybe be called by different names in different places. It could even be, since I remember Shibani mentioning that a lot of people in this webinar are from the education or tech business. So in such a case, it could be a counselor trying to guide a student on what course or what career would be the best fit for him or her. So to identify all these people will be the first major step, and then obviously the actions which performed by these people. Let me take the same example of a counselor again. The actions here could be, does the counselor actually understand what kind of a course the student is looking for, or why he's looking for certain course? Because at that age, to make a life choice can be quite overwhelming. Does the counselor have the right experience to guide the student into picking the right option, more than just trying to fill up seats in whichever department is empty? So when you do this, when you satisfy the buyer at that basic level, I think that's what propels your organization forward in a very big way. And obviously, the last part is weighing these actions. So you basically decide which is more important. Let's say a tone. You place a lot of emphasis on the kind of tone your counselor is taking up with this prospective student, or the kind of knowledge he or she is sharing with the prospect. So you weight all these, and effectively at the end, for every prospective lead or every prospective buyer, you have a culminative score as to how his or her experience was. Because at the end of the day, that's what it comes down to. When I go to buy something, all I look for is the experience I get, and this experience is provided by the human who's representing your brand, which is effectively your sales agent. And the strip here again, the quality which you define is always going to be based on what the customer expects out of you, what the customer expects out of your business. Again, these things differ. For an education industry, in the education industry, what a student expects is different from what someone, a policy buyer, expects from an insurance organization, or what a house buyer looks from a real estate company or builder or a broker. So these things are always defined by your buyers. And obviously, you as leaders or managers or team leads need to define the process which will be followed by the entire team. uh, because the idea behind this is to drive it based on data, drive it based on hardcore data, so that the decisions which you take are based on real insights, and you don't have to basically beat around thin air. And once you identify this and make it an organization wide approach, this is something which all it will align all your sales teams to come on to a single process. So the next thing which I wanted to get into was to probably show how LeadSquared as a tool can be customized as a quality management system. I know that a lot of you might be using LeadSquare. A few of you might not be aware of what LeadSquare does, but we've tried to break it down into very simple aspects of the product, and we've tried to make it visual so that you get an idea about what, not only what a QMS, which I'm sure we've talked about a bit now, not about what QMS can offer, but also how LeadSquared can be leveraged as one. Uh, so before we get into that, uh, I thought we could have one last poll to probably try and understand. I think Shubhani will take this one ahead.
Hi, so thanks, Aditya. Yes, we want to know if what sort of inquiries do you get, because of course, when it comes to a quality management system, this is essential. So let us know. Do you have a telecaller team, or do you get inquiries via the phone? Because if you do that, if you do get inquiries via the phone, then this bit is really important to you. I'm getting a unanimous 100% right now. Oh, okay. Now it's dropped to 95%. But yeah, most of the people here are getting inquiries via the phone, which I think is true in the case of most businesses. But it's good to know that, because for you, if it's, I mean, if most of your inquiries come by phone, a quality management system is really useful. Yeah, I mean, the response is unanimous. So I'm going to close the poll now. Back to you, Aditya, with the latest on the percentages, which is 87% say yes and 16% say no.
Oh, that one is a significant yes-driven poll. Thank you for that, Shubhani, and thank you, everyone. So like I was saying, so LeadSquared, for those of you who know about LeadSquared, it's inherently uh, a major player in any industry which is defined by high velocity sales. So for all of you who've said that they get a lot of inquiries over phone or irrespective of the source, LeadSquared has been for some time now solving this aspect in a big manner. And going forward, what we'll look at is how LeadSquared can also function potentially as a quality management system. So like we are saying, LeadSquared is as a platform is industry agnostic. It caters to a wide variety of industries, start even from education, insurance organizations, to manufacturing companies, to different companies in the marketplace segment, and anywhere where there is a certain level of high velocity sales, LeadSquared has a big sweet spot. So now the general users of LeadSquared are quite varied. We'll probably look at from a QMS perspective, who could use the system. Obviously, you have a sales team, you have a list of telecallers, field executives who are already there on LeadSquared. But apart from that, your quality team. This could comprise of different quality auditors. You could have a hierarchy behind them, a lot of managers, quality audit managers, different teams doing different functions, and any other member from specific quality audit teams could also potentially use the system. And the ones who could potentially get audited include majorly the telecallers from the response I got from the poll, but it could very easily be extended to any sales agent, be it your field sales agent, your query resolution team, or any other sales personnel, like I mentioned previously, who you think is playing a major role in providing some sort of an experience to a buyer. So going forward, we have taken into account that the quality team could potentially involve a bunch of quality auditors. It could also involve an audit manager, and we've tried to build a view for them to show you how it could potentially look like in LeadSquared. So for all of you who are familiar with LeadSquared, you probably already know what a smart view is. But for the benefit of everyone who is not, so a smart view is a major USP of LeadSquared, wherein it gives you the ability to create highly targeted buckets of leads. So these targeted buckets could be based on conditions which you set. It could be based on, let's say, duration. I want a list of all leads which have come in over the last week. So these will be hot leads for me. Or you could say, I want a list of all leads which have come in via an inbound call. So anyone calling your telephony system, you want to bring all those leads into a bucket. Absolutely possible. You want to have a list of leads. You ran a campaign on Facebook and you want to have a list of leads coming exclusively from that campaign because you have a separate strategy for those leads. again, absolutely possible. So smart views is essentially a feature which helps you bucket all your leads, all your prospects, uh, based on any kind of a condition which you want to do. It could also be bucketed based on certain actions which your team has already performed. For example, for a manager, if he or she wants to see a list of leads where a demo of your product has been given, if your user has added that particular activity against the lead, that's again going to come into one easy bucket for the manager to view. So right here on the screen, we've potentially divided it for a quality audit user, to probably show them what audits are pending for today, what kind of audits are pending for today. And if you move on to the third tab, that will probably show you a list of leads where the quality checks are to be performed. And the last two, like I said, it can also be divided based on actions. So any outbound call which has been there for greater than 5 minutes, a list of leads will occur in that tab. And any, let's say, an outbound or an inbound call where the duration is less than 3 minutes will go onto a separate tab. So these conditions are something which are completely customizable. It's something which you choose as per your business needs. You can segregate it based on region. You can segregate it based on time or any other activity which you choose to define. So this will be the daily view which a quality audit user will be having. The idea behind it, like I mentioned before, is to give them buckets of highly relevant data. No one, absolutely no one likes to have clustered data with 60 to 70% not being relevant to them. So this solves that problem. So going forward, once you click into a particular lead, just say we go into Justdeep here. So this is, again, for those of you who are familiar with LeadSquared, this is what a lead view or an activity history view will look like. But again, for the benefit of those who are not, uh, every time you go into a lead, on the top left is something we like to call a lead Vcard, where you get the most important details about the lead upfront. These could include the organization, what's the designation of the particular lead, or their email, phone number, region. And your view on the right is essentially an activity history view. An activity in LeadSquared could is basically any action performed by your user on that particular lead or prospect. It could be a calling activity, it could be an email sent activity. For if there is a field executive who goes to meet the person, he could be using LeadSquared's mobile app to upload documents or add some sort of a meeting notes. So every action performed by a sales agent is essentially an activity which will show up on the screen along with the details of each activity. Since we've built it for a webinar purpose, we've just taken into consideration a calling activity. And once that's done, as you can see on your screen, to configure LeadSquared as a QMS, we'll make an audit button will be available only for the quality audit team or the quality audit managers. So all that the quality audit team will have to do is that now on this view, they have a list of calls performed by this particular user on Jasdeep. So essentially the owner of this lead or the person who has been working on this prospect Jasdeep has performed a list of actions which includes a call. So once you click on the audit button, it will take them to an audit form. So this form can again be customized. So what we have here is that we've pulled in the call recordings on that particular prospect, in this case, Justdeep. So we've pulled in all the call recordings here. We've mentioned the duration up front, and now your sales quality audit person will listen to this recording and grade this effort on some sort of a scale. Again, the form which you see on the right hand side with these parameters which I was talking about earlier. So when I mentioned the three steps, after you find the teams to grade, the second step was choosing parameters. So I've just put in a few sample parameters here. These again could differ based on every organization, and it's absolutely customizable in LeadSquared also. The grading scale is again customizable in LeadSquared. So we make sure that whatever your business needs are is something which is exactly met here. And again, your business needs, we understand, come out of the needs of your prospective buyer. So it's a complete cycle which we'll make sure to map, wherein your end buyer is happy. So like you can see here, in this particular case, the audit person has the call recordings which he will listen to and grade this effort on some sort of a scale. Once that is done, you'll have a cumulative score for that effort. This cumulative score could simply be an addition of all these individual values which are given, or if you want some kind of a custom logic to go behind this cumulative score, that is again something we can implement once we discuss the feasibilities. So this is again a form for a field salesperson. So we were talking about the telecallers, and I understand that a lot of inquiries for the audience here comes through phone. But like I said, this concept is something which can very easily be extended to any sales personnel. Like I said right in the beginning, wherever a sale is involved, sales service quality and quality management should go hand in hand. So in here, the difference will be the kind of actions performed by the field salespeople. So these could be things like visiting a site, visiting a customer, collecting certain documents, or even going and giving a live product demonstration. So you might want to understand if they understood the customer requirements properly, if they actually pitched the current solution, and if they were basically able to meet the customer's demands. So these could all again be customized parameters which you want to measure. If you can see here, the parameters for the FOS person would be revolving around documents, the notes, and again, whatever else you want to add on can be filled in here. So like I mentioned, once the auditor performs his task of reviewing the activities performed by a sales agent, the scores which he had put in will basically here be a culmination of the individual scores. Like I mentioned, if you want a custom logic to be built around it, we can always have a discussion on that. So once this happens, this is, I would say, uh, half the job done. So we've essentially evaluated the activity. Now we get to our main focus of trying to pull on our learnings from here. So like I mentioned before this, the purpose of this exercise is not to sit on anyone's head or point fingers, but more so to focus on the experience which you provide. So let's say the audit activity is being performed and you get a cumulative score, and we can always define in LeadSquared, let's say the cumulative score is below a certain value. If the score is below X, we can send out a notification or an email to the owner of the prospect saying that, hey, so this routine quality check was performed, and we found out that the experience provided in this particular case was not all that great. So we should probably discuss on steps to improve your performance or improve your thought process, and when can we have a discussion on that. So this again is done using LeadSquared, using our extensive automation feature. So the threshold which you want to set, the time at which you want to send these notifications, the people who you want to send these notifications to, can be defined clearly in LeadSquared. For example, let's say the score, you want to set the threshold as 5, and the first time the score falls, this quality audit score falls below 5, you don't want to do anything. You want to just let it go as a one-off. So probably the next time it goes below 5, you want to send a notification to the user saying essentially that we probably have to have a talk. And if it keeps happening over, let's say, a period of 3 or 4 or 5 times, you want to also send a notification to the manager of that particular owner saying, you should probably have a talk and see how what can be improved. So all of these can be done using LeadSquared's extensive automation feature. And one more part which becomes critical here is how you choose these users. So like I said, you could have a very big sales team consisting of telecallers, field executives, and other people, and you want to make sure that all of them are equally audited. different kinds of leads are audited. Basically, you want to cover all bases. That's something which is always good to aim for. So whatever your sampling logic is, we can always check the feasibility of that to see how we can make sure that this auditing is done in the most fair manner for all the users and in the most thorough manner for the organization as a whole, because these are two aspects which you'll always have to keep in mind when we perform such an activity. Also, again, going forward, once the quality audit has been performed, there could be a separate quality audit team with a bunch of people in that, and also an audit manager who might want to perform certain additional things. So this again will be based on smart view. So users in LeadSquared typically work on smart views for the same reasons I mentioned before: highly relevant, neat, crisp data with actionable items for all of them. So as a manager, as a quality audit manager, you will have the ability to see the leads of all your quality audit folks, and it will be your chance to go into each of these and check all the quality audit activities which have been happening. You will also have the ability to change the owners for certain leads which have been sampled out. We can do it manually. We can build an automation around it based on certain conditions. But again, the idea here is to make sure that as a quality, if as a manager of a particular team, you get all the necessary actions which you will need to not only successfully run the team, but also make sure the team's performance as a whole is not being compromised. And again, for the ease of view, we could also have a separate tab on the lead wall page. Let me just, this is again quickly the lead view. For those of you who have not used LeadSquared before, a separate page with all the quality check activities which have been performed by the audit team. So this will quickly just filter out the most um, needed data again, because for example on this particular lead, Jasdeep, there might have been a lot of things which have been going on. Emails might have been sent, calls might have been made, people might have gone to meet him, documents might have been uploaded, but as a quality audit manager, this is not something which you need. You just want to see what your team has done on this particular prospect. So this tab will filter out all those activities for you to view how your particular team has performed. So this is what I wanted to cover from a LeadSquared's capability perspective. Uh, to quickly summarize, I understand that a lot of you might have a few questions also. So I wanted to give a good solid 10 to 15 minutes at least to cover this. So I will get, so once I summarize this aspect, we will get to the questions, because we predicted that the topic is such with sales service quality and a quality management system might invite a lot of queries, and we'd be happy to respond to all of them, and Shivani will help us pick those. But to quickly summarize what we discussed today, sales service quality is something which should go hand in hand with a sale. It's basically the experience your brand provides to a buyer, and this experience is provided by your sales agents, and which is why I emphasized on moving from B2B and B2C to H to H. It's always going to be human to human, and that's something which is not going to change. It's not something which is going to get automated. People like to buy from people. They want to build that relevance. They want to build that familiarity. So it's important for you to look at at any sale from that angle. Once you are clear with that, the next step, like I mentioned, the three steps which I mentioned, are to identify the teams, to be audited. We talk a lot about telecallers and field executives, but I'd like to keep emphasizing that it can be extended to absolutely any sales personnel, as long as you're able to identify the actions performed by them, the actions which are important from your organization's perspective, and you give them the appropriate weightage. Once you've done that, a quality management system is something which helps you evaluate these quality parameters. It's something which helps you keep pushing towards your required excellence level. And it's 2020, and there are a plethora of systems out there, and obviously there are a lot of dedicated quality management systems. But the problem which I personally have seen with a lot of businesses is that once you bring in a lot of systems into your organization, and once you have different teams working on different systems, the connect between teams invariably goes down, the ease of work goes down, the productivity goes down, and it's never a good option to have those many tools in one organization. So a lot of companies are looking to leverage their existing CRM or lead management system or an LMS to perform this additional function of quality management. That's one of the main reasons why we started looking at customizing LeadSquared to be a QMS, because we understand that all the businesses which already use LeadSquared can potentially need the quality management aspect of it. And for even for those who are new to LeadSquared, it's always an advantage that LeadSquared can perform its existing functions of being a CRM, an LMS, a field execution tool, a marketing automation tool, and on top of that, also help you with the quality management aspect. Like I mentioned before, this will make sure your teams don't keep moving between different tools, and all your productivity levels stay intact. With it, I guess I've covered what we wanted to, and I think we still have around 10 to 15 minutes left. So if any of you have any questions, Gaurav and me will be happy to respond to them.
Thanks so much, Aditya. So, yes, let's get started with the questions. So, already so many of you have asked for the deck and the recording, which is always very encouraging. So, yes, you will get the recording and the deck. And as Aditya just said, we are open to questions. So, if you have questions, do write them down now, because we're live for the next 15 minutes. You're gonna get a question. You're gonna get your answer straight away. Otherwise, you'll just have to wait on email or call. So, I'm gonna start with Prashant's question, and I'm going to add a question of my own there just for the benefit of everyone else who's joined and who may have joined late, which is why they may have missed a couple of things earlier. So Prashant says, does LeadSquared record calls? And if so, how are they recording calls?
Yeah, let me take that up. Recording the calls, probably you need to have your a telephony system. So there are many telephony system in the market. We can easily integrate with those, and the recordings can come back into LeadSquared from there. So yeah, I believe that answers your question.
Okay. And then there's another follow-up question by Komal, and I will just consider as a follow-up question. In terms of sales efficiency, so she's saying that was mentioned in the email. What else can LeadSquared do to help in terms of sales efficiency or sales productivity as a solution?
Sure. So for sales efficiency, here our focus was improving their service quality, so that how they are behaving and treating with the customer and how their transactions are happening. So our focus in this PPT was to show how to improve your service quality for your customers. Whereas if we talk about sales efficiency, we have different parameters where we can track how our sales team is doing. So there could be certain targets which are defined for our sales team. We have a couple of reports which are specifically focused on sales productivity in LeadSquared platform. So I think that we can take up separately if required offline. But we have certain reports, certain dashboards in the system which can be used to understand that how our sales is performing.
Okay, and Prashant has a follow-up question to that. So he's saying, how are the telecallers recorded and added to LeadSquared? So I think that was answered. The second one was, can you suggest few telephony systems that are already integrated with LeadSquared?
Yeah, sure. So there are a couple of them. There could be Nolarity you can use. You can use Ozontel. There is Exotel, Mcube, Callmetrics, and we also have a universal telephony connector, which practically works with any telephony system where open APIs are supported. So these are few to name. Yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Sure, Prashant, let us know if you have any further questions. I think Sandeep, you also pinged for a question. I'm moving to Pavitra's question. So she says, uh, in terms of putting a quality management system in place, how long does it take to sort of set it up?
So, Pavitra, was it? Okay,
Yeah.
so setting up the system will definitely depend on the process as such, which you would want to implement. So that will go on a case by case basis. So we'll have to do a deep dive. Like I mentioned, you will first have to do a deep dive into your business to try and understand what you want to audit. And after that, we'll have to do a deep dive to understand the business process, the business flow, and depending on that, I think we can come up with an estimate. It's hard to give a number right off the bat, but like I said, it will depend on all these variables.
Okay, now moving to Gunjan's question. So Gunjan says, what sort of budgets should one keep aside, if at all? If you have a big sales team, a big call center team, then what sort of budget should you keep aside if you're a growing business?
Well, I think it's difficult to commit at this level again, like the previous question. So, there are a lot of things which are involved in place when we implement a quality management system. So, first thing is what type of tools you are using for managing your sales quality. Is it a different platform? Then, if the platform which you're using maybe is another CRM system from where you want to get the data into LeadSquared and then do the quality management, so there is a separate effort for that. Whereas if you are using LeadSquared itself for managing your sales, so we may not have to integrate the system, and we can just directly have your quality team also sitting there, and it's can all be implemented in the same instance or same CRM application which is built for you. So there are many technical aspects to it. In case if you want to know more that might how much time it might take to implement this type of project, we can understand your business use case, and accordingly maybe we can come up with the numbers or the timelines.
Okay, Varun says he came in a bit late, but in a nutshell, if you could mention some quality management tools out there and how is LeadSquared better?
Well, this is okay. So quality management system is quite new, something which we have implemented in LeadSquare recently. Well, we don't have analysis on what are the pros and cons, how are the feature and comparison analysis with another QMS tool as for now, but probably we'll be coming up with that in couple of months. So yeah.
Just to add on to Gaurav's note, and like I mentioned, using multiple tools within the same organization is always a huge pain. And a CRM or an LMS is something which organizations are familiar with, something where they understand the importance, and they're looking at their same CRM or LMS systems to perform this additional function of quality management also. So like I mentioned, that is one of the main reasons we started to think about customizing LeadSquared to perform this additional quality management aspect. And directly answer that question, the major advantage of using LeadSquared as a QMS will be that it comes on top of what LeadSquared offers otherwise also. It says execution features, its CRM, its marketing automation features, and quality management will sit right on top of that.
Okay, the next question is from Rahul, and he says, can you name some use cases of or where some examples of where we can implement a quality management system.
So I guess the first almost the first story which I gave you would have been the major example. But in case you missed that, use cases could be wherein a telecaller reaches out to someone trying to sell any kind of a product, and you try to gauge if they're having the right conversation with the customer. By right conversation, I mean if they're pitching the right product, if they're trying to understand the customer's needs. And I also brought up this example of a counselor trying to guide a student, if that person is equipped enough to guide a young person on what kind of a course he can select, or even let's say pushing it further to a field executive. Is that person collecting the right kind of documents from the customer? Is he making the right kind of notes? Is he giving the right product demonstration? Because you could have a multifaceted product which offers a lot of things, but if you're showing me things which I don't want, I'm not going to be interested. So it's imperative that your field executives gives the right kind of a demonstration. So these are some use cases where it can be implemented. If you have anything else in mind and you want to discuss its feasibility, we'll be happy to do so.
Okay, please brace yourselves. We have more questions coming in, and maybe we'll just keep it brief if you want, so we can address all. So, and I know some of them will be repetitive, but because people keep coming in every now and then, which is why similar questions come in. So, Ramesh says, if I'm using mobile for calls, is it possible to record calls?
I'm afraid that is not possible because there are uh, certain laws and conditions which are being implied on recording calls on mobile, and we are not authorized to do so. So for recording the calls, you will need to have a telephony system in place. That's all.
Okay, Jimmy, I'm not sure in what context you've asked this, but I'll ask the experts here if they can figure it out. So he says, can LeadSquared be shared by a team viewer? I'm not sure if I understand correctly. Would you want him to elaborate?
So uh, I actually did not understand the question. So I what I are you referring to is can we do a screen sharing on TeamViewer, or I do not quite get that.
So yeah, Jimmy, just get back to us on that. What exactly do you mean? If you want us to share our LeadSquared screen as a system, then if that's the case, then maybe we could just get on a demo or something offline, not on this. I'm moving on to Anjali's question in the meantime, and she has a couple of them. So she says, how do we maintain patient quality management in hospital? How do we count lead score in terms of patients call in hospital? And she says, please, yeah, please take case of hospital for lead score.
Okay, so for hospitals, so again, the process goes same. It's possible that the business and the kind of things you are doing is might be different, but the idea remains the same. So in case whenever you have a calling team who is actually talking to your patients, so what kind of information they are giving to the patients, how their conduct is with the patient, how they're talking to the patients, have they answered properly or not. So this will be applied to every industry, so irrespective your end customer is patient or it's a company or whatever it might be. So but the key parameter which you would need to identify is probably this can also come in from in case if you have a support system in place where customers are coming in with their issues which they are experiencing, maybe with your product or maybe with the transaction which they have with your team. So that could be one of the place from where you can identify that what could be the different challenges which our customers are experiencing, and you can focus mainly on those points. Otherwise, you can identify the parameters which are key for you, and accordingly you can just list them down and provide it to your quality team, and who can do the scoring of your telecalling team for even for patients.
Okay. And Jimmy got back to us saying his question was answered while you were answering someone else's question. So another question from Vanaja, and the question is this used only for sales team or also for inbound operations?
Yes, of course, it is also used for inbound operations. So inbound, outbound, your sales team, your marketing team, uh, all of them can use the system. So I believe that answers your question.
Okay, now I have a question from someone with a very interesting name. He's called Indian Rupees. So the question is the audit feature a separate feature to be bought or is it already available? And can a third party be given access to conduct a sales quality audit through LeadSquared?
Okay, so quality management system is a piece which we have recently customized in the platform. So there are certain pieces which will be available by some customization. So this is not out of the box in the product. But as there are different parameters which every industry might have identified, so we'll have to definitely configure the system in such a way that those parameters are identified and the appropriate scoring is given at the back end. Now, each company might have a different sampling logic also, so how they want to filter the cases. So like there could be thousands of interaction which your sales team is doing with the customer, but you want to identify only 100 of them because you might have a smaller quality team. Usually it's like 5 to 10% users only if we compare it with the sales team. So I think that should cover it. That should answer your question.
So, okay, please let us know if you have any follow-up questions. We just have 3 more minutes until the end. So the next question is from Pooja. So she says, I would like to know the parameter of point or score of LeadSquared and how the state changes automatically. I think that's what she's asking.
Okay, so here for the first part, the scoring parameters, obviously these are something defined by you. You tell us what's important for you, and you tell us what weightage you want to give to each of these parameters. If you think something like the right kind of documents to be collected is an important parameter, and you want to give that X weightage, that's something we'll implement or have a deep dive with you to understand and do it as per your needs. And Shivani, could you help me with the second part of that question? How the stage changes automatically? So basically, like I was talking, there is a separate automation aspect to LeadSquared, basically where we say based on some condition being met or some activity being performed, move a lead from stage A to stage B. Let's say a lead is a prospect. You do a lot of activities on that lead, and finally he or she decides to buy a product. You add a payment activity or a sales activity, and we say every time this activity is added, move the lead from stage A to stage customer. That's just one example. It could be implemented in a lot of other ways, but I hope that gives you an idea.
Okay, I am moving to Supriya's question. She says, I have a question. What was the basic idea behind giving scores for every task?
Okay, so giving scores for every task is so there are certain companies where they have different type of hundreds of parameters on which they want to identify the how the call and how the transaction was made with the customer. So let's say if I talk about soft skills, so under the soft skills there could be 10 different parameters. So how they greeted the customer, how the ending of the call was, or how in the how patiently was the salesperson on the call was listening to the customer. So that could be the part of soft skills. And there could be another part where you want to point out specifically to the product pitch. So whether the correct product was pitched, whether the product features were explained correctly or not. So there could be hundreds of parameter, and broadly you would be identifying them. So there could be main 5 categories, and under them there could be 100 more subcategories. And it will completely depend on your business and completely depend upon your choice that what type of parameter you want to look at. And for each parameter there could be different scoring. So maybe you want to focus more on soft skills, so soft skills you will give a higher priority than any other value. So that's why we give the scoring, so that in the end when we reach out all these 100 parameters are filled, and then we'll have a cumulative score based on the percentage of each category what we have defined. So that's why we give a score just to know at the end that for this lead the service quality was 7 maybe out of 10. So to reach that number, I believe that answers your question.
Okay, I see two more questions on my screen right now. So to start with Anjali's question, she says, if customer call is not in network, then is it recorded?
Well, it depends on telephony, but if it actually it completely depends on what type of telephony services are given to you. Usually, when a call is made, only the recording starts when the call is answered. Otherwise, the telephony will also give you a message that call was missed, and on LeadSquared, it will also be displayed like a call attempt was made but not connected. So you will see a message like that. Yeah, I believe that should answer your question.
Okay, and the last one is Mr. Ganesh's question, and I think this sort of maybe will help to summarize the session as a whole. So he says, which industry or rather which line of business does your QMS is your QMS best suited for?
Um, Ganesh, like I was saying, LeadSquared is inherently independent of industry. We serve some of the big names across education, edtech, insurance, real estate, and even things under diverse categories like marketplaces and all those areas. Since LeadSquared is inherently independent and QMS is a functionality we're building on LeadSquared, it will also be inherently independent of the industry. So any business which has a large sales team and are focused and are obsessed with improving their quality to be more customer centric, this QMS piece of LeadSquare will fit in beautifully there.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you, Gaurav. Thank you, Aditya. If you all have any final thoughts, please share them.
Thank you, Shivani. This was an enriching session. I hope all of you got something to take away from it. And thank you for joining and have a good evening.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining the session. You have a good evening. Bye bye.
Thanks so much, guys. So, thanks to the experts for taking the time to do this for us. And thank you so much to the audience for sticking around. Those of you who are interested in customer portals, that is our session tomorrow. So, tune in for that. That's at the same time, 3 p.m. IST. I'm so glad that we were able to cover all the questions that came up today. And a lot of them are thanking you both, by the way, saying thank you very much for the response. And it was helpful. So, yay. That's always good to see. Yeah, and like I mentioned before, the recording and deck will be shared with you soon. Take care. Bye bye.